The next time you're asked to deliver some training that relates to a process or procedure, before you dive into building your slide deck, ask yourself some very important questions. Number one, is that procedure or process locked in? Is it doctrinal? Has it been signed off on by high-level, senior-level managers? Is that procedure 100% accurate? Because I got to tell you, there's nothing worse than investing time in training on a procedure only to find out halfway through the training that this procedure makes no sense. The other thing is making sure that procedure or process isn't likely to change in the near future. If that is a very dynamic process that's still either being ironed out or is very likely to change, you want to be very careful in how you choose to deliver that training, because you know that the second you deliver it, it's going to be out of date, it's going to have a revision or what have you. So you have to build into your training plan. On the front end, I don't want to invest a ton of time into this because it's going to change anyway. And we have to be able to change the training material on the back end because we know the procedure is likely to change. The third thing you want to think about if you're training a process or procedure is making sure you talk to the end level users. Talk to the frontline users of that procedure or process, because oftentimes the people responsible have lost sight of what it's really like out in the front lines. And it could be there's a lot of workarounds that have been developed. It could be that the frontline users have figured out a lot of band-aid solutions. They might ignore the process altogether. They may have created their own, well, this is how we actually do it out in the field. And you want to be aware of that before you invest a lot of your time designing and developing training for that process or procedure. Especially in the corporate world, it's very common for trainers to train on process or procedures that belong to somebody else. They didn't create the process. The trainer is just the mouthpiece who is training a third party on how to do X, Y, and Z. There are some serious pitfalls, some different ways that can go completely off the rails. Here are some tips to avoid that happening. First off, define who is the process owner. If it's crystal clear in your organization, fantastic. Sometimes it's not. And when you ask who owns this process, who created it, who keeps it up to date, everybody goes, it's that person. That's a bad spot to be in as a trainer. You need to nail down who owns this information, because I can't train it if I don't know who's in charge of it. Another important tip is to make sure that that information is up to date. It's current, that what you're about to teach is the current revision of that process or procedure. It's not uncommon for changes to be made to the process and the process owner kind of forgets to tell anybody. So before you dive in, go make sure you're working with the current ref first. The third tip, have the process owner explain the process or procedure to you. Again, it's not uncommon that the process owner, oh yeah, it makes total sense. It's so easy. And then even as they start to explain the process to you, suddenly they start realizing it's not quite as clear as I thought. And that provides you the opportunity as a bit of an internal consultant to say, hey, before we start the training, maybe we need to clarify. It's a bit of a delicate dance, I know, but you want to find that out before you start training. In the training world, we're often asked to deliver training on processes and procedures that somebody else in the organization owns. Here's 3 tips on how to deliver effective training for a process or procedure that you don't own. Tip 1, Look the process owner square in the eyes and ask them this question. Have you vetted your process or procedure throughout the entire organization? In other words, have you taken the time to verify that your process or procedure doesn't negatively impact another department? Everybody in the entire company knows that that process or procedure is good to go, bro. Look them right in the eye and ask them that question. If they start backing off, yeah, now it's maybe time to have a little deeper conversation before you move forwards with your training. The second technique is to ask them to sign off that their process or procedure is locked in, it's not likely to change, and they have vetted it throughout the organization. I need you to physically send me an email, physically sign, this is good to go. And I can invest my time as a trainer preparing to train. If you want bonus points on that, ask that individual to have their senior leadership sign off on it. My experience has been that once you start doing that, all of a sudden they're going to go back and just double check that everything is locked in. The third technique is to ask the process owner to participate in your training. Have them take time out of their day to come sit in on your training. Now, this does a couple different things. They're on hand to answer higher level questions that your participants might have, and that's a good thing, right? We want to help the participants to learn, so having the process owner there, man, we can get answers super quick. The other thing it does is it can highlight to the process owner, maybe a couple corners got cut along the way, especially if all of a sudden some issues are maybe revealed throughout the course of the training. When the individuals who use the process go, this doesn't make sense, process owner's right there. You, as the trainer, you could just turn and look at them. If your training session involves teaching a process, consider using index cards as a way to add a little bit of interest, a little bit of spice to your next training session. Put the individual steps of the process on one index card, one individual step on one card. Put the next step on the second card, the next step on the third card, so on and so forth. Take all the index cards and mix them up and spread them all out on the table in a random order. Have your participants put them back in the correct order. You can either have your participants do this individually, or you can do them in a group session. You could even split up into two separate groups with two separate decks of index cards, have a little bit of a race. But this is a great way to make it interesting to review the material. It's a great way to evaluate that your participants understand the process and they can put it in the correct order.